Thank you so much. Well, I'm Polina Kovalova, Free Expression Program Manager at Pan America, and I would like to thank the Highland first for this wonderful space that you provided, guys. Welcome to all, and we prepared for you a range of exciting voices that will read work of Sentsov, Liu Xia, and Dareen Tatour, and other artists at risk and writers at risk worldwide. We also are now launching a new project, Artists at Risk Connection, that will bring together many resources from around the world to help artists to live and work freely. And you can find out more about it at pen.org. We're going to launch this project in a few weeks. And now I want to take a moment and let you know why we decided to have this event today on August 25th. So 2 years ago, on this day, Ukrainian filmmaker and playwright Sentsov was sentenced to 20 years in a penal colony in the north of Siberia for the crime that he had not committed. And now I want to go even further back to 2014, when this war, terrible war, and devastating war started. War in my region between Russia and Ukraine. War that took a lot of thousands of lives already. War that divided families. And the war that lasts until now. In 2014, Sentsov was a young filmmaker in his little town in Ukrainian region of Crimea. And his first movie was well received at the Rotterdam Film Festival. And he just started working on his second movie. And then that was a moment when he felt that he needs to go to Ukrainian capital, Kiev, to join people who are protecting his country from Russian invasion underway in the eastern Ukraine. Later in Crimea already, he was the one who was organizing the Ukrainian soldiers to leave, who were given 6 hours to evacuate the peninsula. He was organizing the cars for them to leave with their families. He was not a soldier, but he was helping the way he could. They caught him on May 10th, 2014. The Russian security agents came to Crimea to find so-called terrorists in the resort community where no one had used this word before. This made-up threat gave the Russians a justification for the takeover of Crimea. Official Russian media praised the annexation, some the promotions, and the innocent filmmaker went to Siberian prison for 20 years. Ukrainians now living under Russian rule in Crimea were told to renounce their Ukrainian citizenship in favor of Russian citizenship. Oleg did not want that, but they made him a Russian citizen against his will. Later in the court, explaining why he didn't obey the order, he said, "We are not servants to be transferred along with the land." Oleg's trial was a real joke. Just for example, this one. To explain the visible bruises on Oleg's body from torture, prosecutors said that Oleg had been engaged in sadomasochism. or this one. Later, his sentence was based on 2 testimonies against him, and later, one of the 2 witnesses against him recanted his testimony in the court, saying that it was given under torture. The other one failed to pass a lie detector test. People were really laughing in the courts until the sentence was actually announced. Attacks on artistic freedom in Russia have not stopped with Sentsov. Earlier this week, Kirill Serebrennikov, a talented filmmaker and theater director, was arrested on trumped-up embezzlement charges. One of the prosecutor's arguments was that he took the money from the government to produce a play that was never produced. Even though there are reviews, videos and pictures from the very play being performed at least 15 times in various cities, including Paris. We cannot pretend that the situation with Alex Sentsov, Liu Xia, and Dareen Tatour, the situation of imprisonment, censorship, and threat that they are facing, they and other artists and writers persecuted for speaking out, we cannot pretend that these situations do not concern us here in America. It does, more and more, and we can increasingly see the ways that lies have been used to divide us, that the media has been portrayed as an enemy, that criticism and outrage are being denied space and legitimacy. We must remember that the right to freely express this dissidence is critical to all of us, regardless of nation, regardless of a region, and regardless of identity. I am very excited and grateful to all the readers that are going to read today, this evening. Our first reader will be Yelena Shmulintson, a film and TV actress who, like Sentsov, grew up in Crimea, and she will read his letter from prison. Then we will hear from Božičević, Farnoosh Fathi, Luis Jaramillo, Marwa Helal, Chee, and Hala Alyan. Thank you so much, and now, wonderful Yelena.
Letter to Pen America from Alex Sentsov in prison. Prison is the meat grinder of human destinies, having fallen into which you stop believing in justice, but don't stop fighting for it. Here, everything is different. Here you try to live and survive, although you feel that your real life has been left somewhere, there, beyond the fence, and that the real you has also been left at liberty, and someone else was put in jail. That all of this is temporary. That soon, everything will be resolved and change. But nothing is ever resolved. Nothing changes.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me here tonight. My name is Anna Božičević. I'm Croatian. I was born and I grew up in former Yugoslavia. And today I'm going to read the poems of Liu Xia. And I'm sure most of you know who Liu Xia is, but in just a few quick words, she's a poet and a visual artist, and now widow of Liu Xiaobo, the Chinese poet and Nobel Peace Prize winner. And Liu Xia has been under house arrest since his award in 2010. And aside from a clearly sort of orchestrated propaganda tinged YouTube that was just released in the last couple of days, she hasn't been seen since his burial at sea in July. It's hard to read these poems and contemplate what it means for a poet to be imprisoned and to be imprisoned for her husband's courage, and especially for someone who values personal freedom and irreverence so much. And reading Liu Xia, you know, like things that you figure out pretty quickly is like she likes to have fun, she likes to dance, she's a drinker and a smoker, which many people from former communist countries can identify with. And I want to read some poems. There's sadness in these poems, but I want to also read poems that are full of that spirit that's being contained. The reason why the containment is deemed necessary. This is called Drinking. Before going to drink with my old brother, I will unplug my telephone. Coming back drunk before, always, I could not help phoning a friend. The period when I could not talk has been too long. After drinking, I might look ugly and sound piercing. The voices from other side of the phone were sometimes warm or sometimes strange and distant. After waking up, I could realize nobody would like to listen to the nonsense from a drunk. During such a night after drinking, I would love Raymond Carver. Two drunks write poems face to face without talking. There would be no shame nor embarrassment. I will always remind myself before being drunk, unplug the telephone. It's something we should all keep in mind. Or at least I do. This is called How It Stands. Is it a tree? It's me, alone. Is it a winter tree? It's always like this, all year round. Where are the leaves? The leaves are farther away. Why draw a tree? I like how it stands. Aren't you tired of being a tree your whole life? Even when exhausted, I want to stand. Is there anyone to keep you company? There are birds. I don't see any. Listen to the sound of fluttering wings. Wouldn't it look nice to draw birds in the tree? I'm so old and blind, I wouldn't see them. You don't know how to draw a bird, do you? You're right, I don't know how. You're an old, foolish tree. I am. I love that old, foolish tree. And here's a poem called One Bird Than Another. Back then, we were always talking about the bird, not knowing where it came from. The bird, it brought us warmth and laughter. One winter night, yes, it was a winter night, the bird came to us while we were soundly sleeping. Neither of us saw it. In the morning, we saw, sun on glass, its small shadow imprinted, staying for a long time, refusing to leave. Then we started to hate winter, the long slumber. We put a red lamp outside overnight, so its light would tell our bird we were waiting. Vines full of grapes grew in the yard. We kept the windows open, remembering the bird, but we didn't talk about it anymore. One Sunday, the sky was overcast, but it wasn't raining. We went out together, and you bought me a blouse from a boutique. When it got dark, we went to a crowded restaurant and ate each 2 bowls of dumplings. On the way back, we were quiet, not saying a word, feeling slightly uneasy. Arriving home, we saw the lamp flickering in the yard and a handful of green grapes on the porch. We stopped walking and looked up, then together lowered our heads. The bird had come and gone. We murmured but didn't speak, worried it would never return. The door opened at last, and a mysterious red radiance streamed out. There was a piece of paper with written lines, but you couldn't write a word. I wanted to try on my new clothes, but I couldn't undress. The bird, again, the bird. There are a lot of birds in these poems. Here's a couple more poems. It's called I'm Tired. I'm tired. I'm tired of my white pills. I'm tired of the smiles I make at you. I'm tired of what they say about you. I'm tired of being tired. I'm tired. I'm tired of only seeing roads that I cannot travel. I'm tired of filthy skies. I'm tired of crying. I'm tired of the plants dying. I'm tired of sleepless nights. I'm tired of empty letterboxes, and I'm tired of the cage. My love, I'm tired. And this is called Rant. I'm the soul in the body of Nijinsky. Gaunt, I eat little, only what the gods allow me. I hate having a bloated stomach. It inhibits dancing. I'm afraid of crowds, of dancing for them. They demand a joyful jig, but joy is death. They feel nothing but want my life to match theirs. I stay home to avoid the crowds. Shutting myself up in a room, I stare at the walls and ceiling to feel a life in this prison. I'm a philosopher who thinks with my body. I'm biological theater, non-fiction, the body of spirit whose language is poetry. I am prosody. Sleeping pills don't work, and alcohol doesn't work either. I'm exhausted and want to stop, but this spirit in me won't permit it. I need to go to some great height and look down. I need to go until I reach that height. I need to get going.
A brief bio about the writer Asli Erdoğan, and then I'll read an excerpt of her short story, The Prisoner. Asli Erdoğan is a renowned novelist and human rights activist in Turkey. She is also a columnist for Özgür Gündem newspaper, a pro-Kurdish opposition daily, and a member of its advisory board. On August 16, 2016, Erdoğan was detained from her home by Istanbul police. Her arrest came alongside the arrest of more than 20 other journalists and employees from the paper Özgür Gündem, which was shut down by decree as part of the state of emergency in the country following the failed coup of July 15, 2016, just a month earlier. Turkish courts stated that the outlet made propaganda for the PKK, which is the Kurdistan Workers' Party, and which is listed as a terrorist group and acted as its de facto news outlet. On November 23, 2016, an Istanbul court dropped the charges of disrupting national unity against Erdoğan and 8 others charged in the case. However, the terrorism charges still stand. The indictment seeks an aggravated life sentence for Erdoğan, as well as the other writers and activists associated with the paper. On December 29th, as the trial opened, Erdoğan was granted a conditional release from detention and was released under a travel ban that evening. The travel ban was lifted for both Erdoğan and fellow defendant Necmi Alpay on June 22nd, 2017. The next court date is set for October 31st, 2017. And reading this piece, I just really wondered, where is the place that we go to, when we are empathizing? Where is that place? When we write, and also when we write our way there, and when we're just there, like when we're here empathizing together, and that there's something absolute about that place, and I feel that here in this writing. Sorry. And I feel like that's the thing that gives me hope, that this beautiful person is actually strong, is actually capable of being there still. That night she dreamt of an endless swamp. Bulrush and ivy taller than man, gnarled plants, trees that trembled like old women, dangling their scrawny hair, clouds low enough to touch the ground. The man ran away as fast as he could, slipping in the mud, tripping, falling, rolling. He ran away, smeared with blood and mud. The pack of dogs approached. The ring narrowed. Hopeless, he lifted his head to the sky as if to pray or protest, maybe to look at the sky one last time, and saw a ladder descending from the clouds. A massive, transparent, sparkling ladder, made of raindrops, an unhoped-for gift of the skies. When he started to climb, it broke, shattering to the earth in 1,000 shining pieces. That's when the woman appeared, the goddess of the swamps. She rose from the dead, rode through the black waters with her hands. Buried thigh-deep in mud, her roots went deeper, down to the earth's memory. Algae, dead leaves, and leeches hung from her hair. Her eyes were fish meal for the swamp's creatures. She hid the man under her skirt, in the soft, warm, sticky mud. When darkness fell, the hunters and dogs all left. No one could spend the night in this terrifying swamp that glistened with green flashes, where thousands of poisonous eyes shimmered like stars, where thousands of roads simultaneously appeared and disappeared, where no sound could be heard except for the hoarse wind, except for the woman. She belonged here. This was her real world, this wind, this silence, this solitude. This swamp night, where the dead and the living called out to each other, and the darkness of earth was indistinguishable from the darkness of people. Embracing all those who were lost or defeated, whispering the dreams of subterranean waters. In the weak moonlight, without a sound, her flesh tearing, she brought the man back to the world, smeared with mud and blood. Something had gone wrong. She'd given birth to a freak of nature, with arms where his legs should be, and legs where his arms should be. The man lurched and continued to run away, falling and scrambling up, floundering, struggling. The woman extended the ladder she'd woven from her hair towards him. "Take this road," she said, showing him the track forged in the water by her large, heavy, muddy tears. She stood in the middle of the sidewalk, straight, unmoving, like a goddess statue on a rock, open to abuse. Her face expressionless, her gaze steady. She settled her empty eyes on an imaginary horizon, pressed her bag to her stomach. She'd lost her voice. The wind blew her hair, shook her like a cypress tree caught in a storm. Here, on this sidewalk, she could light herself on fire, scatter her smoke. She had turned into a challenge, a summons, an entreaty. Come, even just once, for even a second, appear. Otherwise I can't return to that long, agonizing wait, to that void. I can't take it anymore. Until the prisoner was taken out of the stone building and brought to the patrol wagon, she stood there, straight, inaccessible, mute, blowing about in the wind, open to abuse. She saw it all. The momentary light in the man's pupils which showed surprise, or joy, or gratitude, or love, or none of these. The slight movement at the corners of his mouth, the vague greeting he made by lifting his cupped hands to his chest, the sign his forefingers made, just at that moment. A police officer hit the man, cursing, hitting his head while being stuffed into the wagon with the others. She saw it all. Even after the patrol wagon had long gone, she stood there, immobile, rubbing her forehead, as if it was her head that had split open.
An event like this makes me also aware, as I'm sure you are too, that many people are not safe or free, not just around the world, but in the United States too. I have the honor of reading a couple of poems by Indamiro Restana Diaz. Restana Diaz was the former vice president of the Association of Independent Journalists of Cuba. When he received the Penn Barbara Goldsmith Freedom to Write Award in 1995, he was serving a 10-year sentence for rebellion and for preparing publications, this is a quote, aimed at inciting civil disobedience. This is punishment for his activities as founder and president of the Movement for Harmony, an opposition group that called for the release of all political prisoners and an end to Cuba's one-party system. A few weeks after the announcement of the award in 1995, Restana was released, and when he came to the Penn office the following September to accept the award, he thanked Penn for their efforts in securing his release. So, Penn actually does real work. We should support them monetarily too. 20 years later, there have been advances in the freedom of the press in Cuba, but during the Black Spring of March 2003, Cuba imprisoned 75 dissidents, including 29 journalists, on the basis that they were acting as agents of the United States by accepting aid from the US government. The youngest of the dissidents, Normando Hernandez Gonzalez, was sent to Kilo Siete, a prison with truly horrific conditions. physical and psychological abuse, unbearable heat, food not fit for humans, and cells that are like cages. The work of journalists in Cuba continues to be made difficult because of harassment and intimidation from the authorities, outdated press laws that limit distance, and the restrictions and high cost of internet access. But Indiamo Rosell Diaz has kept up pressure on the government through his establishment of an independent press bureau of Cuba, and this too is dangerous work. Following the announcement of the bureau's founding, two Ministry of the Interior officials met with the writer and told him, "Someone could kill you in Indamido. This is the most sensitive area where you are attempting to tread." So here are two poems. The first is titled Prison. Mother, do you know where your poet is? Well, they have dragged me into a dark, narrow, lonely cell. And do you know why, Mother? For not allowing fear to carry me away. But I am not completely alone, Mother. I have got to know a good friend here. A small spider visits me every day and spins in the door of my cell. When the guard comes, I let it know so it hides away and doesn't get killed. I want it to live, Mother, because I know that it has inside it something that I also possess. However, it seems the guard does not know this. Mother, do you know where your poet is? Well, they have dragged me to a cold, narrow, lonely cell. And do you know why, Mother? Because the poet is the only person who never forgets the meaning of freedom. The second poem is an excerpt from a letter to English pen. To Ron Wooden, I am the creative mirror which creates you. I am the sorcerous mirror where you dance when you see that everything has the sense that we give it. I am the magical mirror, and so are you. And we are experts in understanding, experts in knowing that if it is possible to leave, it is possible to return. I am the creative mirror which creates you with the expressive language of the light. Thank you.
Say thank you to Penn for the wonderful work they do on behalf of artists and poets like Ashraf Fayyad. Ashraf Fayyad is a Palestinian poet, artist, and curator living in Saudi Arabia who was sentenced to 8 years in prison and 800 lashes on charges of apostasy. He was initially sentenced to death. Fayyad was first arrested in 2013 on accusations stemming from his poetry collection, Instructions Within, and an alleged personal altercation with a man who reported him to Saudi religious authorities. There are concerns that he is being targeted because of his status as a Palestinian refugee, as well, although he was born in Saudi Arabia. Fayyad was born into a stateless family of Palestinian origin, and his only identification documents are issued by the government of Egypt. Tense Times, a poem by Ashraf. Tense times for me, and sleeps acting like a newly love-struck teen. I shall disregard the state my heart's in, and my mind's upheavals like water bubbling past the boiling point. I am a part of the universe with which the universe is angry, a part of the earth of which the earth feels utterly ashamed, a wretched human towards whom other humans cannot maintain neutrality, an illusion, like all the graces of which humans speak, so shamelessly theoretical. Truth is an inadequate term, just like man, and love bumps about a miserable fly trapped in a glass box. Freedom is very relative. All said and done, we live in a ball-shaped prison, barred with ozone. Set free, our fate is certain death. I am incapable of laughing, completely incapable of smiling even, incapable at the same time of crying, incapable of acting like a human being, which doesn't upset me in the slightest, though it hurts so to have a body covered with light down, to walk on two limbs, to depend wholly on your mind, to be drawn after your desires to the furthest point, to have your freedom trapped, to have others decide to kill you, to miss those closest to you without a chance to say farewell. What good does farewell do? But leave a sad impression. What good's meeting? What good's love? What good is it to be this alive while others die from sorrow over you? I saw my father for the last time through thick glass. Then he departed for good. Because of me, let's say. Let us say because he could not bear the thought I died before him. My father died and left death to besiege me without it frightening me sufficiently. Why does death scare us to death? My father departed after a long time spent on the surface of this planet. I didn't say farewell as I should have, nor grieve for him as I should have, and was incapable of tears, as is my habit, which grows uglier with time. The soldiers besiege me on all fronts, in uniforms of poor color. Laws and regimes and statutes besiege me. Sovereignty besieges me. A highly concentrated instinct that living creatures cannot shake. My loneliness besieges me. My loneliness chokes me. I am choked by depression, nervousness, worry. Remorse that I'm a member of the human race kills me. I was unable to say goodbye to all those I love and who departed even temporarily. I was unable to leave a good impression of the last meeting. Then I yielded to the rifles of longing leveled my way. I refused to raise my hand and became incapacitated. Then I was bound by sorrow that failed to force me to tears. The knowing gnaws at me from within, killing every shot I have at survival. The knowing is killing me slowly, and it's much too late for a cure.
Reading from the work of Jang Jung-il, South Korean writer, who, when his poems were first published in 1984, was described as a masochistic terrorist, and an author, quote, who exposes pretensions of wickedness in society with a devilishly puritanical spirit. His fiction, poems, and plays have unfailingly attracted controversy over the years for their frank portrayals of sex, drug use, pleasure, and self-destruction. The novel that I'm going to be reading from here, When Adam Opens His Eyes, is one of the first to describe gay sex in Korea. When his novel Try Lying to Me was released in 1996, all publicly available copies were burned, and he was sentenced to 6 months in prison for violating norms in place at the time which governed the country's media. While he has not faced imprisonment since, he has continued to face the effects of other state-enacted limitations on artistic expression in recent years. Following the recent impeachment of Park Geun-hye, for example, a government-created blacklist surfaced which included more than 9,000 artists, writers, and performers who were seen as critical of the Park Geun-hye administration, Jang Jung-il included. Blacklisted artists were allegedly to be excluded from receiving government support funds and private support, prevented from using state venues, and put under state surveillance. Given South Korea's continued criminalization of defamation, PEN America has called on South Korean officials, especially within the culture ministry, to take positive steps that South Korean artists and writers feel safe to express themselves and their political beliefs without the fear of recrimination or blacklisting. I was thinking as I was listening to all of the excerpts being read tonight, like what, if anything, connected them. And the only thing I could think of was how afraid all these governments are of our humanity. That seems to be the only connection I can think of. I was 19 years old, and the things that I most wanted to have or a typewriter, prints of Munch's paintings, and a turntable for playing records. Those things alone were all that I wanted from this world when I was 19. But so humble were my desires that, in comparison, my mother's wish for me to enter Seoul National University, or my younger cousin's dream of joining the Samsung Lions baseball team when he grew up, seemed even more out of reach. If my desires hadn't been for such trivial things, but for something larger, like becoming the president, I could easily have fulfilled that desire by driving a tank, or randomly firing an M16. Or I could have fulfilled it deep in the night, by ejaculating in a wet dream, or by giving up completely. I mean, I could have fulfilled my dream simply by throwing it away. In the sense of being freed from the desire, completely giving up might be nothing but my desire's fulfillment. So whoever discovers how to empty himself of all desire will become a free person, one who controls himself so perfectly that he becomes his own master. That year, I failed to gain admittance to the university my mother wished for me in the major that I wanted to study. I began cramming for the next year's entrance exam. Sending a child to university was hard for a poor family, and supporting him for an extra year of cramming was even harder. Not only was the cost of repeated tutoring hard to bear, but even worse was the gossip of close relatives who sometimes dropped in, or neighbors who lived in the same one-story building, paying monthly rent for cramped quarters. At that time, my mother was working downtown as a cleaning lady in an underground shopping area. After I failed by only 7 or 8 points to gain admission to the English department at the university, I briefly considered going to any of the provincial universities in my hometown that would offer a scholarship, but I decided to accept my older brother's advice. The reason that I found his advice persuasive was that an extra year of cramming for the entrance exam had gotten him admitted to business school in the university that I had applied to. Besides, I was hard-headed enough to insist on meeting my own stubborn goal. Even if that aim was first expected of me by my mother, why shouldn't we do a favor for our parents who gave us life? Cramming an extra year for another test means becoming a lonely student. There's an old saying that women in olden times had to live for 3 years mute, 3 years blind, and 3 years deaf while living with their in-laws. An extra year of cramming is not much different. I realized this acutely upon seeing that my exam number was missing from the list of successful candidates. From that moment of failure, I was estranged from the world. For a month after the announcement, I could not face my friend Yoonsun. I even feared getting a call from her. My fear, I admit, was a kind of shame, but a teenager's fear of the other sex often stems from shamefulness, so the fear is easily understood. Although we had been friends from the 11th grade and we were close enough to overlook each other's faults, I still could not free myself from the shame of failure. In fact, for the first month, I tried especially hard to avoid everyone close to me. I could hardly even sit at the dinner table with my mother. The very day after successful candidates had been announced, I registered at a cram school in an area downtown that was thick with those institutes devoted to helping students cram another year for the university entrance exam. I had become so used to this style of learning in my past 3 years of high school, so deadened to everything else in life, especially during my senior year, that I felt I would have felt crippled if forced to live differently. Just looking away from my books and notebooks for a brief moment was enough to give me feelings of insecurity and anxious helplessness. As I later discovered, those who failed the exam and immediately registered at a cram school were usually people suffering from delusions of persecution, just like me. I met Yoonsun at a tea room. Since we'd last met, she'd learned how to drink coffee in quite an elegant manner. Like an actress in a television ad, she lifted her cup delicately, drank with poise, and smiled softly. "Could you have a look at this?" she'd asked. "I'd like to be a published and recognized poet no later than the end of this summer." Yoonsun and I had first met in the 11th grade at an exhibition for poetry and painting hosted by her school's literary club. Now, as well as then, a high school exhibition of poetry and painting was one of the few officially acknowledged places where students could meet members of the other sex. It was there that I discovered a lovely poem that immediately caught my eye. It had been written by Yoonsun. "Did you write the poem, An Inferior Student?" I had asked. "Yes, I did." I was meeting Yunsun for the first time, a girl with a face and a name unknown to me, until the club president who had invited me to the exhibition pointed her out when I asked who had written that poem. "It's not bad, your poem. People think I copied it." When I had approached her that first time to talk, she had responded indifferently. She seemed to have little interest in the exhibition, even appearing a little irritated. "You mean The Inferior Student by Prévert?" I asked. "Yes." I could understand her irritation. Her poem was similar to Prévert's only in the title. No, actually in their nuance. The one Yunsun had written and The Inferior Student by Prévert were also somewhat similar. But Yunsun's poem was more honest and intense, maybe more modern. I had that impression not only in comparison with Prévert's poem, but also compared to the scribblings by all the other high school poets. Together with her, I returned to her poem and read it again. Writing a poem in math class, I get thumped on the head by the teacher. Writing a poem in science class, I get caned on the poems by the teacher. Writing a poem in social studies class, I get ridiculed by the teacher. Writing a poem in Korean class, I get reprimanded by the teacher. I don't like teachers. All the teachers in the world, I hate them so, writes an inferior student. I'll stop there.
I'm going to be reading the work of Dareen Tatour, and the paragraph that I was given is so beautifully written, I'm just going to read it as is. Dareen Tatour is a Palestinian poet and photographer currently under house arrest on charges of incitement to violence and support of terrorism. She was arrested October 2015 after posting her poem, "Resist My People, Resist Them." She posted it on YouTube and Facebook, and on November 2nd, she was indicted by Israeli prosecutors on two charges, incitement to violence and support for a terrorist organization, which could result in an 8-year prison sentence. The final hearing in the trial took place this April, and she remains under house arrest while awaiting the verdict, which is expected to take a few months. In an interview with the Israeli daily newspaper Haaretz, Tatour said, "I am against all violence, but it is my right to ask why you killed those you killed. There is no law in the world that prohibits me from stating my opinion." Tatour's defense claims that the evidence against her centers on a mistranslation of her poem, which was originally submitted in a Hebrew translation rendered by Israeli police. The prosecution has objected to Tatour bringing an alternative translation before the court. And by the way, the word is martyr or victim. And so she had been using the word victim, and it was taken to the court as the word martyr. And the prosecution objected to this despite the fact that several alternative versions of the poem produced by qualified literary translators exist, backing up her claim. Tatour is one of some 400 Palestinians in Israel who've been arrested for posts on social media since October 2015. I was contacted by Adele New York with some new information, which is that there is an event being hosted by the Arab Hebrew Theater in Jaffa on August 30th, in a few days, by artists in support of Dareen Tatour and who are calling for her release. And currently, per an article on Al Monitor, the Ministry of Culture under Miri Regev's direction is threatening to stop funding the theater entirely for holding this event unless they shut it down. I don't think I have to talk too much about how disheartening and dangerous such an act would be. I myself am the child of Palestinian and Syrian immigrants. I think a lot about luck and timing and how the incredible amount of privilege that I have and sort of these hyphenated identities that can at times feel like more like diasporic tourism than anything else. And so I stand here very much aware of my privilege, and I want to do with that privilege the only thing that is redeemable, which is to use it to amplify the voice of people who don't have it. So this is "Resist My People, Resist Them," translated by Tareq Haidar. Resist, my people, resist them. In Jerusalem, I dressed my wounds and breathed my sorrows, and carried the soul in my palm for an Arab Palestine. I will not succumb to the peaceful solution, never lower my flags until I evict them from my land. I cast them aside for a coming time. Resist, my people, resist them. Resist the settlers' robbery, and follow the caravan of martyrs. Shred the disgraceful constitution which imposed degradation and humiliation and deterred us from restoring justice. They burned blameless children. As for Hadid, they sniped her in public, killed her in broad daylight. Resist, my people, resist them. Resist the colonialist onslaught. Pay no mind to his agents among us who chain us with the peaceful illusion. Do not fear doubtful tongues. The truth in your heart is stronger. As long as you resist in a land that has lived through raids and victory. So Ali called from his grave, resist, my rebellious people. Write me as prose on wood. May my remains have you as a response. Resist, my people, resist them. Resist, my people, resist them. And I just wanted to read two short poems that were translated by Jonathan Wright while Dareen Tatour was under house arrest. This one's called I'll Forget It As You Wish. As you wish, I'll forget it. The story of us that's now part of the past, and the dreams that were once the fill of our hearts. We would have liked to make them come true, but we killed them. I'll forget things, oh love of my life, things we said, the poems we wrote on the walls of our hearts and drew in colors, the trees under which we sat for a time, and the names we carved. I'll forget them as you wish, so don't be angry. And this last one is called I Will Not Leave. They signed on my behalf and turned me in a file, forgotten like cigarette butts. Homesickness tore me apart, and in my own country, I ended up an immigrant. I abandoned those pens to weep over the sorrows of the inkwells. They abandoned my cause, my dream at the cemetery gates, and that person who's waiting laments his luck as life passes. Besiege me, kill me, blow me up, assassinate me, imprison me. When it comes to my country, there is no backing down. Thank you.